You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the biohealth capital region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, CEO and founder of BioHealth Innovation in the biohealth capital region, and also the host for BioTalk. And we have not had many repeat performers on BioTalk, but we have one today for you. And she was flashing her BioTalk mug, which generally, when we were doing this in person, everybody that was on BioTalk got a mug. Unfortunately, since we've done so many remote ones, I owe probably about 100 mugs to people right now. And now that we can see people in person, I'll personally deliver when we get the opportunity. But we have one of the leaders in personalized precision medicine in the biohealth capital region and emerging nationally and internationally. It's Dr. Amrie Grammer, who's the co-founder of Ampel BioSolutions, located in Virginia. Amrie, welcome back to BioTalk.
Thank you, Rich. I'm drinking my coffee out of my mug right now.
Great. Well, hopefully we'll have many other times in the future as you continue to succeed to continue to drink out of that mug. And I think the listeners are going to be amazed at the progress you've made in the last couple of years since we last talked. So, but some people did not hear you. So let's assume nobody did. And we're going to let you, first of all, introduce yourself as well as Ampel BioSolutions to everybody on this podcast.
Well, thank you, Rich. I'm excited to be back. I'm calling in from Charlottesville, Virginia, which is the corporate headquarters of Ampel BioSolutions. I'm a scientist, entrepreneur, a double who with a chemistry and a pharmacology degree from UVA, went to UT Southwestern Medical Center at Dallas for my PhD, did a short postdoc, and was recruited to the NIH to run a lab in the 2000s. And it truly was the right place at the right time. Exciting being there while the Human Genome Project was going on.
And basically, you're down in Charlottesville, Virginia, and something we might have talked about later in the interview, but why not talk about it now, is that you could be anywhere in the country. And you decided to form Ampel BioSolutions in Charlottesville, and great community and very beautiful down there. But why not Silicon Valley? Why not Boston? Why not Research Triangle? Why you in Charlottesville, Virginia?
Great question, Rich. I grew up in Northern Virginia, obviously went to UVA, was at the NIH in your neck of the woods for almost 10 years. And when myself and my co-founder, Dr. Peter Lipsky, who is the clinical and scientific director of NIAMS at the NIH, were looking for locations, we investigated all of the places that you mentioned, and I insisted that we look at Charlottesville. We ended up here for a number of very important strategic reasons. One is that we built our RNA analytics and machine learning technology for precision medicine from the ground up, and we fully own it. To do that, we'll be 10 years old in July. Took quite a bit of money and effort. So we needed to find a synergistic location where we could take the time necessary to do that. And Charlottesville was the place. And just a little interesting fact that I was thinking about the other day, we actually needed a supercomputer to plug into the wall. And so our original office was at the North Fork UVA Research Park near the airport. Of course, everybody uses cloud computing now, but 15 years ago, I needed to find supercomputing that we could afford and an office to go with it. Quite a challenging thing back in the day.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. But I think you're getting ready to celebrate your 10th anniversary with Ampel BioSolutions, aren't you?
We are very exciting on July 13th. And the community, not only in Charlottesville, Virginia, I'm a third-term Virginia Bio board member. That's how we met, Rich, and the BioHealth Capital Region Forum. All have been great resources with mentors, introductions to funding. And really the key, it's something that's underappreciated in our region, is the genomic talent coming out of bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs. Often now it's called biomedical engineering and data science. Truly one of the best in the country and a very high concentration of talent that wants to stay in this region.
You know, the other thing that's interesting is that you are a growing example of bench scientists who want to experiment with entrepreneurism. And so talk a little bit about that transition from actually being at the bench, not that you've left it totally, but also this venture into entrepreneurism that you've had with Ampel BioSolutions.
So when I was at the NIH in the 2000s, when the Human Genome Project was happening, there began to be more and more examples of physician scientists starting companies. And I followed that example really for the very basic reason that I wanted to live the motto, bench to bedside, fully translate all the information, the genomics about RNA and DNA to transform human health, which is quite the topic of the Washington Post and many of the media outlets at the time. I was inspired with my co-founder, Dr. Peter Lipsky, to live that.
And then generally also as entrepreneurs, sometimes it's a solo entrepreneur going by themselves, but with Peter Lipsky, you've had a co-founder and a partner that have stayed together for a number of years. Talk about that relationship a little bit, Amrie.
I'm excited to talk about the over 30-year scientific collaboration and now company collaboration of myself with Dr. Peter Lipsky. We both feel a little weird tooting my horn here, but are world-class scientists. We've published almost 100 peer-reviewed papers in Nature, Science, Cell, etc., just in the last 10 years. And through our relationships as consultants in pharma, our deep relationships in Stanford really gave us the mentorship that allowed us to transform and become a personalized precision medicine company.
And you mentioned Nature, and that's a nice lead in because a couple months ago, I understand Ampel was ranked by Nature as one of the top precision medicine companies with respect to the impact of published science. And there's some pretty interesting names of other companies that you're associated with there, including but not limited to Foundation Medicine, Illumina, Tempus, Thermo Fisher, Guardant Health, and Adaptive Technologies. So with all of these players, many of them with significant resources, global companies that you would consider in the same space, how do you differentiate what Ampel BioSolutions does versus some of these other people that you're listed with?
Very important question. There are several key differences. One is the majority of the companies that you just mentioned specialize in oncology. And the NIH and the NCI really encourage that field as the first to capitalize on bringing immunotherapies to solve a variety of cancers. In addition, the majority of those companies are focused on DNA, genetics. I say it's like stud poker, no wild cards except in the circumstance of stem cells, where there's no reason to do a test more than once. Ampel decided to focus on dynamic RNA, which when DNA opens, when your body gets a signal, whether you're drinking a glass of wine, exercising, taking a different medication, the DNA opens and RNAs, 20,000 in all, turn off and on like light switches. My brother's a lighting designer, and I like to say it's like looking at the lights on stage at the theater, rock concert. You see the combination, which is like the symptoms of our body, but there's somebody in terms of the light board or in terms of our cells that are turning those 20,000 off and on. Ampel has made the tools that actually group those by drug target, cell function, and pathway so that we can translate the RNAs that are expressed to the right drug to the right person at the right time.
And you're saying that this is unique and the others can't do it exactly in the same manner in which you're doing it.
That's correct. And I would extend that. Ampel is the only entity in the world that has full genome coverage in terms of RNA analytics. And that's our major competitive advantage. We're actually members of the 21st Century Precision Medicine Coalition located nearby in Arlington, Virginia, where all of the companies you mentioned and more, we collaborate in the non-competitive space on government policies and other aspects to all assist each other in truly bringing personalized precision medicine and transforming human health.
That's interesting. There was another program NIST had on cybersecurity where all the people in cybersecurity came together, even though they were competitors, to come on, develop standards because it was such an important topic. Sounds like the 21st Century Precision Medicine Coalition understands and works in the same way around precision medicine.
Exactly. And you can also think back to the late 1990s and the 2000s. That non-competitive space collaboration is the way that the Human Genome Project was executed. It took a universe of scientists at every level, from the PhD students all the way to, for example, the director of that program, fellow UVA grad Francis Collins, to truly bring that to fruition. And a little known fact, there was a good draft of the human genome in 2000 when I started my lab at the NIH, was about 90% complete in the mid part of that decade. But it wasn't until about a year ago that the full, complete human genome sequence was published.
Wow. I mean, a lot of people around the world may be aware, but there's a lot that aren't aware of the impact that this region has had on DNA and precision medicine that's going to impact all of us in the future. And so I guess we've been throwing around this term precision medicine, and it means different things to different people. So it's really an exciting era that we're in right now. But tell us what, in your mind, precision medicine really means, and why does it hold so much promise? And then the other thing is, what are the challenges that Ampel has around precision medicine, and how are you going to overcome them?
Great questions. So first of all, Ampel really emerged out of thinking of our time at the NIH and the inspiration of the Human Genome Project. So we use the word precision medicine in the way it was originally coined, which was improving human health through genomics, whether it's DNA that's inherited or RNA, which is dynamic. And that's the reason Ampel chose RNA, because it's a real-time measure of what's going on in every cell of your body. So you have the opportunity to interfere with that with different interventions, everything from smart biologics that are targeted to old-fashioned small molecules to health foods or nutraceuticals. So what are the challenges? The biggest challenge was making the tools to group the RNAs. And I mentioned that Ampel is the only entity in the world. We have over 35 patents filed and pending that cover 100% of all expressed RNAs. We've reduced that number to the 200 groups that define the universe of the immune system and inflammation. And Ampel's focus is autoimmune and inflammatory diseases. So we use predictive statistics, also called machine learning, to reduce to the minimal number of RNA analytic tools grouped by drug targets that define each disease. So 200 for the immune system, 32 for lupus, 45 for dermatology. That is our second product. Now, you asked me about the challenge. In autoimmunity, the reason why there's a real desire for precision medicine is that a lot of drugs are prescribed off-label. Lupus, there are only 3 FDA-approved drugs, and over 95% of the drugs prescribed are prescribed on a doctor's judgment. Why is that? Because there are multiple subgroups of lupus, and it's trial and error. On average, it takes 5 years, if ever, to get to a drug regimen that works. Popular culture example, Selena Gomez was very public about her journey with lupus. She was diagnosed before the beginning of a tour, and by the end of the tour, she needed to have a kidney transplant. And she's been recovering very well, but she's spoken very openly about the challenge and the journey of finding the right drug for the right patient at the right time.
That's a big task. The right drug, right patient, right time. But it's taken over 20 years for the Human Genome Project, which started at NIH, to get to where you are today. An analogy is that 30 years ago, everybody talked about biotechnology. Then we went into cybersecurity. Now everybody's talking about quantum computing. And now we're into precision medicine. But the difficult thing for people to understand is actually, how do you get a product out of all of these different things that people really chased wildly to be the leader in their state, region, or in the country? And now precision medicine's in that stage now. And it's really coming up with real applications for patients and real products that address precision medicine. So talk a little about the right drug, right patient, right time, and why it's taken 20 years to get to this stage.
Bringing precision medicine tests, products to the market is the reason that Dr. Peter Lipsky and I founded Ampel. We realized that we needed to single-mindedly focus on that to accomplish it in our lifetime. We'll be 10 years old as a company in July, and in July, bringing our first product to market, a blood test for patients with the autoimmune disease lupus, which the awareness month is May. What will that test do? We've listened to doctors, patients, insurance companies, and payers. And in this case, it's a rare circumstance where all of the entities are desiring the same thing: to shorten the time to an effective drug regimen, therefore preventing flares, which are kind of, you could think of that as a volcano. A volcano, the beginning of it could be happening for years, but people don't notice it until it blows. So Ampel's blood test for lupus predicts flares, determines what are the abnormal pathways, cells, functions, and with the clinical validity data from the trials that we're conducting, will provide decision support for drug options that physicians can consider. Similarly, our second product will be a skin test for autoimmune dermatology. And the third product will be a blood test for wellness. That will be a quick turnaround. The opposite side for people of our age, Rich, the flip side of the record, are you in a low range of inflammation or not, to be used at an annual physical, and that would be up to the physician and the patient to dig in of what looks to be abnormal and how to treat it.
I wish I was your age, Amrie. When you say our age, I bypassed you by a few decades, but that's okay. Hopefully, precision medicine will keep me going for a few more decades, for sure. But really, when we talk about what's going on, I look at it as convergence. And you really have pharma, bio, vaccines, medical devices. And now what we have is AI, machine learning, quantum computing, NLP technology. It's all converging together. And I would say Ampel BioSolutions is really one of the best examples within our region of how this convergence is actually coming to play in actually getting solutions to patients that's going to improve their life. So talk a little bit about that convergence.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, Rich. And in addition, we really are penetrating internationally. Dr. Lipsky is in Seoul, Korea this week at the International Autoimmune Meetings in Lupus. We're both going to Europe in the end of May. We regularly travel to Boston and California. Ampel is part of the global precision medicine community, and our focus is autoimmune and inflammatory diseases. Our products will be first in class, not only for dynamic RNA, but also for the diseases. In terms of the region, I'll highlight that there are a few other precision medicine companies that have started to come and join, and I'd like to suggest them as guests on your show. Veracyte out of California acquired HalioDx in Richmond. They have a lab there. And Exact Sciences now actually has a facility in Harrisonburg. So I'd say that Ampel has been the anchor precision medicine company for the region, particularly in Virginia. And we're waving the flag and attracting others now to build the region in terms of workforce, revenue, and of course, jobs, which is very important.
And tell me a little bit about, now you mentioned Virginia and the support you've gotten. Talk about the kind of support you've received from the different resources within the state or within this region that's enabled you to grow to where you are today.
So I'm a UVA grad. So the University of Virginia was very welcoming at all levels to help support the development of Ampel BioSolutions, even though we grew the IP ourselves. So being able to have a location at the research park, utilizing the supercomputers to really partnering with the Career Center and the growth of our workforce has been very important. Virginia Bio on a state level, the partnership with your organization, BioHealth Region, Capital Region Innovation Forum, as well as there are a lot of regional organizations that have been mentors and really collaborators in building the biotech community from the ground up. When I started Ampel BioSolutions in Charlottesville and was planning it 15 years ago, there were really only a handful of companies, probably less than 20, that were a core group. And now I dare say that we're over 200 and growing at a very rapid clip. Mentoring as a scientist and now a scientist entrepreneur is in my blood. It's the way that I was trained, not only as the bench, but other scientists, entrepreneurs that gave freely of their time and advice to mentor me. Now I'm a member of the Laguna CEO Forum that meets once a year. That's the who's who of precision medicine. Very involved in a number of national groups that I always try to bring back home to the region and mentor people of all trainings, from MBAs who have a scientific interest to the youngest in our group. We're hosting an international high school student from overseas, for example, this summer.
Well, that's great. You know, to be honest with you, it's very important for entrepreneurs and leaders and CEOs to give back to the community, especially in an emerging field like you're in right now. And Virginia, which has really over the last 5 years had a dramatic increase in its impact and growth within the biohealth community. So I'm speaking with Dr. Amrie Grammer, who's the co-founder of Ampel BioSolutions in Charlottesville. And she is an example of someone who has been giving back, and congratulations on doing that, Amrie. But let's talk a little bit more about other people that maybe have influenced you or you've read about, and other scientists globally or nationally that you think have had some impact on this same field. And you mentioned to me before that Dr. Leroy Hood that I had on BioTalk a couple of weeks ago, who is really one of the most prominent scientists in the world, very influential in creating many biotechnology companies that are household words today, has identified 5 major healthcare challenges as quality, aging, chronic diseases, cost, and understanding the genome as it pertains to racial origin. So let's talk a little bit about the relationship between Ampel and these 5 major healthcare challenges, and how Ampel's technology is going to help tackle some or all of these challenges in some of the disease you're specializing in.
Well, Dr. Lee Hood is spot on, and I'll talk about it in a minute. Dr. Hood is the example of a scientist entrepreneur that's been an inspiration for me since the beginning of my training. I'll get back to that in a moment. To directly answer your question, Ampel's disease focus of autoimmune and inflammatory diseases, lupus, psoriasis, scleroderma, atopic dermatitis, for example, are all chronic diseases that people have to deal with every day. And there aren't great treatments, or there are a lot of treatment options, for example, in psoriasis, but there's no way to quickly get the right drug to the right person at the right time. And that's where Ampel's portfolio of blood and biopsy tests come in. Something that Ampel has always kept top of mind is making products that will work for the universe of individuals. And what Dr. Hood mentioned in terms of the challenge of ancestry is top of mind for autoimmune diseases. Ampel has published a number of studies comparing lupus patients that identify as African American, Hispanic, Asian, or Caucasian, and looking at both DNA, genetic differences, as well as those DNA differences that drive dynamic RNAs that could be interfered with drugs. I like to make the analogy that if you inherit something in your DNA that is translated into an RNA and a protein driving your cell, it's like a tsunami. It just keeps coming. And the only way to interfere with it is to block it. And so how have we approached this? I mentioned that we reduced the universe of RNA to 200 groups that define the immune system. Lupus is 32, and we went to great lengths to validate that the universe of lupus across all ancestries is 32. And therefore, all of Ampel's portfolio of blood and biopsy products, we've worked very hard to work for all peoples.
That's amazing. And you mentioned Dr. Lee Hood, but I don't know if I've asked you before, who were the people that influenced you most to, first of all, get into science and then become a science entrepreneur? And who would you classify as your mentors today?
So I grew up in Loudoun County before it was a tech hub, up on Furnace Mountain, right near the Point of Rocks Bridge. I lived pretty much on a farm, and the natural world was my first laboratory. So I was always very interested in the natural world. That was really increased when I went to school. I went to elementary school in West Virginia, and I remember in fourth grade, we were going around the room, and I spent a lot of time in the public library that was right next to my school reading. I remember I would sound out words in my head, and often I would say them out loud to my teachers. And of course, they sounded totally different than the way I had imagined them. But I proudly announced that I wanted to be a microbiologist. I then went through all these other iterations as I was growing up of what I wanted to be. But being an immunologist, becoming a scientist entrepreneur is the closest to that. And going back to Dr. Lee Hood as an inspiration, similarly, he talks about his experience in Montana, growing up in the natural world, the influence of her teachers, being trained in chemistry, references Linus Pauling as being one of his professors. Linus Pauling is actually a member of Alpha Chi Sigma, which is a professional science organization that I belong to. So similarly, also with Dr. Francis Collins, the basic sciences of chemistry are very important to train the mind to think and to also not be afraid to ask questions. That's one of the pieces of advice that I give to younger scientists, to truly not being afraid to fail, asking the hard questions. And that's one of the ways that I see scientific training applying to business, not being afraid to fail, pushing the envelope, seeking out mentors, doing something novel, and being able to find individual and groups that will not only support your endeavors in an intellectual way, but will support you financially. And an interesting thing about Ampel, we're 10 years old. The first third of our life we supported with grants, the next third with revenue from pharma. We talked a lot about that on my last interview. And then we started raising money. And we've raised 10 million, and we're in a bridge round right now and have our first institutional investor. All of this is possible because of community, mentorship, and not being afraid to ask the hard questions and to really pursue the adventure of science and bringing it to reality, which for Ampel is precision medicine, the right drug for the right person at the right time.
Yeah, you mentioned fundraising, and persistence and patience generally pays off. But right now, it's a challenging climate for people raising money in the country. So for all the entrepreneurs that are listening right now and those that might be raising money, talk a little bit about your tips for trying to raise capital at this time when there seems to be people backing off a little bit and waiting for some correction to happen. And what differentiates your strategy for raising money, Amrie?
So I'll share a little bit about my approach, which is really from mentorship and looking at the data. You know, I'm truly a scientist and I learn from data in terms of what is a consistent strategy that works even in hard times. It's finding individuals and groups that truly identify with the mission of your company. You need to find individuals that not only identify with the technology, but identify with the business, and then also straddle the middle. And Ampel has a very strong advisory group who are also all investors that bring all of those approaches to the table. Don't be limited to instruments that are popular at the moment. There's always the most trendy way to raise money, but it may not be right for your company. So explore all options. And I think the mentorship of local organizations like Seville BioHub, CBIC in Charlottesville, Venture Central, the annual biohealth meeting that your organization holds at Virginia Bio, as well as thinking outside the region. A lot of the inspiration and mentorship that I received in fundraising was really from San Diego groups and San Francisco groups. I think we talked a lot about that on my last visit.
Well, it never ends. The job of a co-founder and a leader of a bio company has always got their hand out. But I think one of the things that benefits you, though, and it goes back to Dr. Hood again, he said that the possibility of understanding the human genome as capable of catalyzing the biggest revolution in healthcare ever. So the key is you might be in a sweet spot. So regardless of the challenges in raising capital, if you're in an emerging market that has significant growth potential, it can always attract investors.
I would 100% agree with that. Believe in yourself and leave no stone unturned. I just wanted to mention briefly a very interesting thing about Ampel's logo, the 4 stones on the left. First of all, our logo is green and blue, which in a lot of native cultures is a sign of health. The sky and the grass or water and the natural world. And the 4 stones, I love art. I'm on the UVA President's Arts Council. Art and science are like a circle. So there's a native myth, especially the Inuit people in Canada and Alaska, that the god and goddesses of medicine and healing are located within the stones. They're always there. They're hidden. And you need to reveal them in order to really improve your health.
In additional national attention that you've been receiving, some of the news outlets, including Bloomberg and NPR, have reported that Ampel BioSolutions is on the cutting edge of harnessing big data and machine learning research. which has really become very topical right now, but people don't know how to grasp it and manage it and apply it. So talk about a little bit of how Ampel's work fits into this context of wellness and personalized precision medicine, which also Dr. Lee Hood believes in tremendously.
Agreed. So there are 20,000 genes that can be expressed in all of your cells at any given time. This is trillions of pieces of information. So that's why people call it big data, and why Ampel originally we needed to plug into a supercomputer. Now we've used either Amazon or Google cloud computing to be able to very quickly take all of that information, use Ampel's tools to group it by drug and cell target, and to be able to predict what's right for you, Rich. And how do we do that? Really, it's fancy statistics or predictive analytics. People coined the word machine learning or artificial intelligence as taking trillions of pieces of information and being able to either look at what's happened in the past and predict what will happen in the future, or unsupervised artificial intelligence and machine learning that works more like the human brain with layers of neural nets that are able to take trillions of different types of classifications and add that on to all of the things that you're looking at, like the groups of the RNAs, to really get to the bottom of truly what are the universe of drug targets and therefore therapeutics that will work for the right drug, the right person at the right time. And to follow up, when you were asking about challenges, why is it taking so long? Because even though 92% of the human genome was sequenced in the mid-2000s, it took time to know what those genes really did. And to do that, looking at human health, looking at bench to bedside experiments in the laboratory. And what Ampel has done is made the tools to translate that information to a product, a blood and biopsy test that doctors will be able to order, just like your cholesterol or any other blood test that you get at your annual physical, but will inform decision making so that it will improve your health. And very importantly, as Dr. Hood talked about wellness, scientific wellness. I think we talked about his book just recently, which all of our groups are working towards in a different way. Ampel is doing it by predicting low inflammation, which is crucial. Many groups have talked about that inflammation is the root of all disease. And the more that we could do on an everyday basis to reduce inflammation, the healthier we'll be and the longer we'll be on this planet.
Well, I think we're all for improving health and longevity. And so potentially this data-driven health can help do that. So in closing, let's talk about the future. What do you think the BioTalk listeners can expect from this data-driven health that we're in right now over the next 3 to 5 years? But more importantly, it's taken you 10 years to get to where you are today. Are we going to be able to get to meaningful outcomes quicker now, since people are understanding better how to manage this data to come out with specific outcomes related to rare diseases and chronic diseases that people have today? So talk about your prediction for the future, Amrie.
So Ampel's vision of the future is now that our RNA analytic and predictive machine learning platform has been validated for about 18 months now. We've gone across all disease areas, including oncology, a liquid biopsy approach to lung cancer, infectious disease, predicting those that may have a severe life-threatening outcome to a viral bacterial infection, as well as across all of cardiology and autoimmune and inflammatory diseases. Ampel is focused on bringing 3 products to market over the next 3 to 5 years: a blood test for lupus, a skin biopsy test for autoimmune skin diseases, and a wellness quick turnaround blood test to predict those in low inflammation. We're working with co-development partners across the other disease areas, and we're in the process of working with pharma partners for out-licensing. In terms of the global future of precision medicine, I think the 21st Century Precision Medicine Coalition and all of its members, we're all working together in a non-competitive space to bring the translation of genetics, DNA, as well as RNA and genomics to the everyday bench to bedside of a patient experience. This will start in regions like the Capital Region with Johns Hopkins, the NIH, other high density medical centers. I predict in 5 to 7 years, we'll begin to penetrate primary care providers, especially in the arena of scientific wellness.
Well, I believe in what you're saying, Amrie, because you delivered on what your goals were years ago. Maybe sometimes it's not a straight path, but entrepreneurs know how to navigate to get through some of those rocky roads or those valleys and the peaks that they may have. So is there anything that we haven't discussed that you want the BioTalk listeners to know today?
So Ampel BioSolutions is located in Charlottesville, Virginia. About half of our workforce is there. Half is across the country. We're always looking for smart people that would like to dig into precision medicine everywhere from business to the C-suite to the R&D scientists. We welcome outreach. We're looking for co-development and licensing partners across disease areas from oncology to infectious disease to autoimmunity. I'd like to share with the listeners that truly myself as a co-founder and Dr. Peter Lipsky are very grateful to the NIH community, the community of Maryland, DC, and Virginia for mentoring and support at all levels. And we're very much looking forward to growing and staying in the region and being part of the community for the future.
Well, you're going to continue to be an integral part of the growth of this region, Amrie. So, by the way, if anybody has an interest in working with you as a partner or for the company, how do they get in touch with you?
Ampel BioSolutions website, AMPEL biosolutions.com. And Ampel also means light. We bring light to problems. So I look forward to speaking to anyone that's interested, both from partnering, co-development, to actually synergizing with the Ampel workforce. And Rich, thanks so much for your time today.
You're welcome, Amrie. We've been with Dr. Amrie Grammer, co-founder Ampel BioSolutions, on her repeat visit to BioTalk, which will probably not be the last. So thank you very much, Amrie.
Have a great day, Rich.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.